Hi, welcome to the first video for our comps prep for Health Policy 711. So for this session, there's two parts. Asynchronously before we meet, I'm going to ask you to do two things. The first thing is to find and read a long form news article about a health or policy problem that's not related to your thesis. So specifically here, I'm not asking you to find a research article, but an article in the newspaper or a news magazine, something which sort of gives you a bit of a texture of the problem and the different stakeholders or different groups involved in that health or policy problem. The second thing I'm going to ask you to do before we meet is to watch the 3 video lectures that I've prepared. This is the first video, which sort of introduces the topics. I've created another video about how to assess quality in qualitative research, and then a third about how qualitative research and health policy fit together. When we meet by Zoom, we'll discuss the content of those videos. There'll be lots of time for you to ask questions about them or about your reading and your preparation for comps. And we'll do a few exercises to try to help you prepare for your exam. So this video is on the topic of the essential components of a qualitative research project. It will be a little bit of a review from the fall session that I run in 711, but I think that it's really important scaffolding for you to be able to understand what the different aspects of a qualitative research project are in preparation for studying and for writing for your exams. So I've created this video in a format that will allow you to pause it in order to check your understanding by quizzing yourself, writing down some answers, and then you can sort of see how how your answers stack up as the video progresses. This is a pedagogical technique called test-enhanced learning, where we know from education science that tests are useful for enhancing your learning, not because of the writing of the test, but because of the cognitive process of you searching your mind for the answer helps, that retrieval process helps embed the answer in your mind. Okay, so here's the first opportunity for you to quiz yourself. What are some of the essential components or considerations when designing a qualitative research project? And these would be components relevant to all projects, no matter what the topic or what the approach of that qualitative research project are. As a hint, they're also relevant to quantitative research projects, although some of them are not discussed very explicitly. So if you like, you can pause the video and write down your answers, or you can just keep watching through. So the first essential component of a qualitative research project is the philosophical assumptions. And this sometimes is called a worldview or a paradigm, but they are a set of assumptions about what exists, what can be known about it, and how we can know those things. And typically these are referred to with these 3 words here: epistemology, ontology, methodology. Every project has assumptions about what exists, what we can know about it, and how we can get that information. But often in quantitative projects, these aren't made explicit. In qualitative projects, because there's more options, more different sets of how we could think through these different ideas, it's important to make these explicit and to think about how your philosophical assumptions inform the other aspects of your research project. The second aspect, the second essential components when you design a qualitative research project is the methodology. So a methodology is a way of getting information, per the last slide. And these are often embedded within disciplines. They're congruent or incongruent with particular philosophical paradigms, so you need to make sure there's a match there. But what a methodology is typically is a package of guidance about how to do qualitative research. So each methodology will have particular guidance about how you would collect data, how you're going to analyze that data. They'll have particular criteria for ensuring quality, all in sort of a congruent package that that you can work with these different pieces all together. The third aspect is a research question. So your research question guides your inquiry, and it should be congruent with your methodology. Each methodology will have a particular focus of inquiry, so you want to make sure that the methodology you pick is appropriate for your question. Typically, these two elements, the methodology and the research question, are chosen iteratively, which each sort of informs the other, and sort of you can tweak or you can refine each aspect so that they fit together well. In qualitative research, your research question might shift over the course of your inquiry, especially if you're using a methodology where data collection and analysis iterates in a way that leads you to a refined understanding of your phenomenon. And you'll need to look to your specific methodology for guidance on whether this iteration is something which is essential or recommended or appropriate, and how the research question iterates alongside data collection and analysis or not. Finally, a really important aspect of your research project is a plan for data collection and analysis, again, which is congruent with your methodology. So here you can think of your methodology as a menu. It tells you what's available, but there's still many different choices for you to make. You need to choose what you're going to order and then the different modifications that you might ask of the kitchen. So to continue with this metaphor, we can imagine that if you're dining at a Greek restaurant, you might choose to substitute rice or potatoes for a particular dish, but you wouldn't really ask them to bring you a side of spaghetti because that's not on the menu of this particular restaurant. Similarly, when you're designing your research project, your methodology will describe a variety of ways that you might collect data, and it's up to you to pick and choose the data collection methods which best fit your research question and your suppositions about what will yield the richest and most feasible data, and then to refine, to tweak, to substitute those methods in a way which is congruent with that methodology, with what's on the menu in order to best serve your needs. We also always talk about sampling and recruitment. So this is about how you're going to locate this data, and whether you're sampling and recruiting people or doing a different project that doesn't involve human participants, there's still considerations about how you're going to find this data. So in terms of research with people, it will be important to think about the type of groups that you want to talk to or observe, how you're going to identify them, how you'll invite them to participate, and how the strategy might change as the project progresses and analysis proceeds. If you are doing a project where your data is not coming from people, or at least you're not eliciting directly from people, you still need to think about how you're going to identify what data is rich and appropriate, and how you're going to make decisions about how much data is enough. So sometimes we talk about sampling documents, we sample cases in a case study. The word sampling, the concept here is just about choosing rich and relevant data that will inform your project. It's also important in qualitative research to consider the role of the researcher. So this is again closely linked to the philosophical assumptions and to the methodological tradition that you're working within. And these will provide guidance on how you should think about the relationship between the researcher and the data, the researcher and the participants, the researcher and the analysis. Sometimes, in some methodologies, the researcher is the research instrument, and there's really clear guidelines about how to consider knowledge as co-created, to examine your own influence, and to be transparent about that to readers of your research. Other qualitative methodologies take a more post-positivist approach and ask the reader to bracket out their influence on the work, to try to remove themselves. And this is a key distinction between methodologies that's also reliant on your philosophical assumptions. So it's important to be very clear about how this consideration is operating in any specific project. So here's the list of the aspects that we've talked about. I often use these headings when I'm writing a method section or writing a grant proposal, just to make sure that I'm covering all the bases and that I'm thinking about how these different aspects fit together with each other. Because really the congruence of these different elements is such an important marker of quality. And to give you a hint about your comprehensive exam, it's something that we consider when we're looking at your answer is, are you talking about these different elements? When you answer your question, are you talking about these different elements in a way which is congruent? Or is there some way in which there are conflicts or tensions between the ways that you're combining these different aspects? So any question that you ask or that you consider with qualitative research approaches, you have to answer that question in concert with the other elements of the project. And of course, you also have to consider feasibility, time, resources. These aspects will also change how you choose the elements and how you apply them in your project. So in terms of some more readings, here are some readings that I find helpful for thinking particularly about the philosophical foundations, which can be one of the more challenging and also sometimes I think a more intimidating aspect of qualitative research. And you also have readings from Morse and Lincoln and from Linham and Guba on your comprehensive exam list, which will be helpful for this topic. Uh, the other part of your comprehensive exam reading list, which will be really helpful for thinking through these questions, are your methodology specific readings. So on your list, you have a number of different readings that are about particular methodologies, and it will be important to understand the differences between these aspects, between data collection and analysis and philosophical foundation, how they think of sampling, how they think of recruitment, how they think of the role of the researcher, and to be able to compare and contrast some differences and similarities across methodologies. Introductory textbooks such as the one by Creswell can give you an overview that highlights some of these differences or takes a sort of a comparative approach. Also, typically texts that are sort of like introduction to qualitative research type textbooks will offer information about this. In terms of resources when you're conducting the research, each methodology typically has a book or a set of core texts for guidance. And these are really essential to conduct when you're designing and carrying out a specific study, although probably they provide more detail than you need for your comprehensive exam. And that's the end of video 1.